welcome back. We are continuing on working with the DataMesh book, and we are now in chapter 10, and our little pre-discussion, we're becoming practitioners, some of us, and so we're going to have coverage of chapter 10, but then I have something to show and Elliot has something to show. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the book. We're in part 3, where the pedal is hitting the metal, how to actually design this thing, and I've actually done some client work, which is informing my understanding through the second time here. So one of the first things I'll tell you in actually trying to build something using these principles is I think that this is backwards in the chapter organization, where it says design a platform driven by user journeys. Okay, I agree with that, but you want to first start with the consumer and then do the developer part, because the whole point of this is data analytics microservices, so it's the consumer. So the developer wouldn't know what to develop, right? It's like the old problem we had of the developer doesn't know what report to write, because you write a SQL query and you give it to the consumer and they say, no, that's wrong, or change this. So I would put this in a different order. So I'm going to just skip here to this order. So is everybody in? I'm sorry, I can't see. So I'm going to have to switch here. Oh, let me let Varsha in there. Okay. Okay, hi Varsha, welcome. Okay, so we're starting on chapter 10, and in actually trying to do this, like any good analytics, you are going to have a user journey, but you're going to start with like who's using it, right? And what I thought was on point in this section was, and I'm actually dealing with this exact scenario right now for one of my customers. She says, I'll focus on example data scientist persona who's consuming its existing data product to train an ML model, and then is deploying the ML model as a data product to make inferences and generate new data. I mean, this is like what I'm trying to support in the bioinformatics world. And what's interesting is, and I find this to be true, ML models can belong in either plane. They can either be microservices, so basically endpoints, or they can be transformers. And that's our whole world of Gen AI. If you guys are not aware, all the cloud vendors have released now between 30 and 50 foundational models for customers to party on in terms of implementing LLMs within their organization. And so it's like gangbusters out there of people trying to use these things for either microservices, but usually they'll use them as transformers first. So my world now is like the old static dashboards that I did for years and years and years are completely gone. This is just spot on. Everything's ML all the time. So I thought, this was really on point. So this is the way I'm thinking about the problem. And then again, I always like her diagrams. So she has this sort of dual approach here. So in SEP, so think of it, explore it, bootstrap it, source it, build it, test it, deploy it, run it, maintain it, evolve it, and retire it. This is sort of classic software development lifecycle, but applied to microservices. Interesting that she breaks it out consumer and developer, because usually consumer would not be doing all these steps. So that's kind of an important nuance, that consumer is involved in the building. Product owner sits with the rest of the team, if you will. Again, she's building on the principles that she talked about in the previous chapter, which is you have the mesh experience, and I look at this in cloud as like the org level policies. And then this is where the work happens. And then the data product experience would be at the sort of group IT level. And this part is hard. Everybody knows how to do org policies, right? But this is the tripping point right here in when the pedal hits the metal, in my experience, because who does what in this new world of, and I keep saying analytics microservices, but that really is helping me with implementation with the customers, because the idea of microservices is known, and it's not a one-for-one analogy, but it's a little bit more concrete than data products. Maybe too concrete, I don't know, but you have to start somewhere, to get from the drawings to actual APIs. So
I like it because I found data products confuses people because they start trying to sell them to other people.
Yep. So I say microservices, analytics microservices, and that's been really helpful. So blah, 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 it's things we know, nothing really new here. Separate the planes. Okay, fine. All right, and then going back up to the developer side here, she details the roles. And, obviously she works for huge enterprises or with huge enterprises. This is like 2 people where I work. It's not like, I don't know, 6 or a team or whatever. And I'm not meaning to make fun of enterprise or make light of it, because there's a certain, role for that as well. But that's not where I'm really working, especially with ML. I don't find that in ML and cutting edge ML, you don't have these huge teams. It's more experimental. And maybe it's my vertical, maybe in fintech, thinking back, where they have more resources, they do have that. But I think like the sort of majority of the data situations are not this full of people, basically. There's fewer people. So you think of combining the roles.
Yeah, or their existing roles that are augmented and taking their existing people taking new organizational role, like the data product owner, right?
Yep.
Like, is every outcome team going to have a data product owner, or is the product manager going to learn how to be a data product owner?
Well, that's such a good question, right? Like, let me make it very concrete. Like, one of the things that I'm working on is this multi-organizational augmentation of base genomic data sets to bring in more representative samples, because right now some of the core data sets are biased. And so who is the product owner, right? When you're multi-org, is it the org product owner? Is it the NIH in this case? Who is the product owner for microservice analytics, analytic microservices? That's something that you have to iterate on to figure out what works. So
the other confusing part I've had as I try to apply this is how granular is a product.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that gets more confusing if you have multiple owners. Are you making the product's presentation ready, or are you making it good enough that they can join, 4, 5, 10, 12 different products together? At what point are you doing too much work in the product and there's nothing left for the end user? And now you've got product sprawl because
right. Well, that's why I started with the consumer, right? Like, who's using it, right? And is it, the way she writes it is it an API? It's like you just put in some data, you get a result, or is it a transformer that has some tuning to it? That's the way I interpret that, right? And so that approach has been helpful for me when I try to talk about some of my data sets as analytic services. Just that way, is it an API? Just put some data in, get a new result out, or is it a tunable sort of transformation? That's why I started with that. Again, same thing. Okay. As you can probably tell, I found a lot of this pretty high level. It was like blah, blah, blah. I was fine with all the high level earlier on, but now it's like the pedal hitting the metal. Like, what do I actually do? The title of the section is design, right? So like, how do I actually do it? And to be fair, this book is, I don't know, a year or 2 old now. So, that's up to us, right? That's why we're meeting to figure this out. But I needed to augment. So you can see what I did. Basically, I took the data product developer journey phases and I tried to overlay them with, in my case, GCP services. Like, okay, for the Incept and Explorer phase, that would be setting up in GCP Dataplex the catalog, which the metadata is actually held technically in what's called a Hive metastore in Dataproc. So that's how this section would be implemented. So kind of like a to-do for me would be if you were going to build this out, you'd then have to overlay which technologies am I going to use to implement this before you could go further, because you have to know what are the capabilities of the technologies you select. And that might drive which ones you select. And then for the bootstrap and the source, I was looking at this idea of lakes and zones, which I have introduced in other meetings. And I think all the clouds have the concept here of lakes and zones. I hear someone wants to speak, so go ahead. Nope. Okay. Okay, and then I think I stopped at that point. Yeah, one of the other things that's interesting is we had a discussion in a previous meeting about the actual guts of the microservice and what this thing was, and we talked about this idea of a sidecar. It was interesting at Google Cloud Next last week, one of their services to quickly run containers, easily test them out, build them, is called Cloud Run. And I think all the services have this. You can run small size, either websites or jobs using Cloud Run, but it's kind of a level to get started with container building, testing, scaling before you move to Kubernetes. And they just added the ability in Cloud Run to add sidecars. And I was like, interesting, because of this concept of you have a sidecar container that works with your particular implementation. And this is some organizational logic we figured from previous discussion. But actually building this is something that I would love to hear if anybody has done this, because I haven't yet, and I would love to see some pattern.
It's interesting. The sidecar principle, I'm still grasping if it's just philosophical, like, hey, you know containers and you know what you do with sidecars. So all of these kind of like standard things, including policies, etc., are going to be like a sidecar. So I'm still trying to figure out, how that is implemented in a data product. And I think philosophically it's the same as a container sidecar, but I don't think it's actually like that. I don't think that's the actual technical implementation detail. But no, this one still seems a little abstract to me.
Does anybody have an example? I can't even think of an example, so that we could maybe discuss it, even from another type of not analytics microservices, from just regular old operational microservices.
You could have like a telemetry like sidecar.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like a pretty popular one, I think. Trying to think, that's one, like log collectors, right? Like maybe you have some sidecar just sitting in the same space that's taking data and ushering it out to another system. That's an example as well.
So what, not to put you on the spot, but like what does that exactly look like? Is it like a Docker container with an API call, or like how does it work?
Yeah, so I haven't done it myself in a while, but essentially it is a container, but I think it runs in the same space as like the parent container. I think that's the best way to think about it. So it is actually like a container, like a Docker container that's running code. It just runs alongside the primary container, who's doing all the functional and non-functional stuff that it was programmed to do, whether it's servicing API calls or running a website or running some job and changing some data. It's always this is the wrong term, but sidecars are kind of like almost implementing non-core functionality, in my estimation, in my experience.
Right.
But they are just Docker containers.
I'm going to have to dig up. I'm going to get into this a little bit, because I get the concept, but I need to build one. And so I need to actually like tinker around with like actual code that does this, right? And I like your logging example. So maybe I can just take that as a homework. And then if I get it going, I can put it on the DataMesh site as an example, our GitHub, because maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but I'm not finding examples other than drawings, and I need to translate it to the next step.
Yeah, the logging example is the one that I think is most ubiquitous, but I think like sidecar examples are there's also like security services. Some people have security agents and stuff like that. I think that's another practical. You're making me want to refresh too, because I hate not fully remembering stuff that I've worked with. But yeah, logging's like a big one. Like, hey, container, do whatever you're doing. My job's going to be take standard out and put it somewhere for you.
Okay.
You know,
okay. That's a good challenge for me to think about.
Yeah.
That's good.
I can't wait to see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then we're in the consumer. Okay. So that is all I got out of here. So now what I'm going to do is switch to my demo. So I've been working in Dataplex, and there's a couple of things that I want to show. One thing I just stumbled on, they was released last week, and it's super recommended to get started with the whole sort of data mesh world. I know Amazon has these as templates, and I think Azure does too. It says relatively new. Google's late to the party here. But there's the Analytics Lakehouse. And these are basically templated solutions that you can just, deploy their Terraform. And this one is completely serverless and uses a lot of the data mesh principles. And it's, charged, it's serverless. So the more you use it, the more, this is obviously minimum, the more you get charged. It does take 12 to 15 minutes to deploy. But what I really, really like about this is it, it's very concisely documented. And then it's usually using data mesh principles kind of as like a starting plane, because I was trying to set this up manually just by clicking, and by using this exploration plane is much richer. And so I would recommend that either, you try this if you want to start building something, or I'm going to ask, maybe we can figure out the equivalents in Amazon if there are, in Azure. So what you get here is you get a bucket, and this basically takes you through. And then you have a lake, and you use Dataplex for lake administration. And then you have BigQuery, because in the Google world, the way this works is you use buckets, or you use BigQuery data sets with the BigQuery engines, which are SQL Analytics engine and SQL machine learning engine. And you then have the ability to process data with Spark. So this is Dataproc serverless, BigQuery machine learning, and then you can visualize with Looker Studio. It's just like a really nice starting point to get you having a basis, and it has sample data with it. And like I said, I know this has been out in the ether for the other clouds for some time for other solutions. I'm curious if there's a data meshy kind of thing you guys have found. But man, this thing just really got me up and going really, really quickly, and provided me a starting point that was cohesive. I didn't have to fumble around as much as when I was trying to set up the individual products. So that's one of my big tips. And the second thing, before I turn it over to Elliot to show us some of the stuff he's been doing on Amazon, is I always have to talk about Gen AI because it's rocking my world. And one of the things that is super interesting and has applicability to data mesh is this new mode of ChatGPT, which is called Advanced Data Analysis. And when you, and I think this is for paid only, I'm not sure, I'm a paid user. When you do this, you just click plus, and then you can upload a file. And just for fun, because it's my world, I uploaded a genomic variant file, a VCF file, which is kind of a non-standard format. And there's my prompt, analyze this data. And I've done some personalization in ChatGPT. That's why it's addressing me as Lynn. And basically, I analyze this data, and it's giving me basically like what is the format, and then it's generated the pandas code if I wanted to have that, and then provide a general overview. So this is kind of the statistical information that my users currently are using our language in our studio to get this basic information. Again, showing the information. And then it's suggesting subsequent analysis. Would you like to proceed with a more specific, such as identifying distribution of variants across chromosomes, or looking for specific type of mutations? And notice I've given it no context. I mean, analyze this data, right? That's it. And it has enough context. And then yes, and then analyzing it. And then it's telling me, would you like to delve deeper? Yes, but I don't know how. Generate a list of suggestions for approaches to further analysis. And here it's generating the analysis types that are most common. And then I'm generating a heat map. And I think I stopped at that point and went, oh my goodness, this is game changer. I really feel like, could ChatGPT with plugins be a analytics microservice is the question on my mind. Like, is all this stuff, we don't have to care about it because we can just figure out how to do a plugin? I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I was pretty impressed by this. I'm curious as to what you guys think about this.
I'm incredibly impressed with this. I had not looked at this new function in ChatGPT Pro, and I'm going to have to, because I've been doing a lot of work with the RAG pattern, and add this to the RAG pattern, and I think you've got some capabilities for some really deep, really custom work.
Any other feedback on Lynn's musings for the week?
Hi. So I see 3 examples here when I am working. So I see 3 examples of microservices being used, but it's not being used as within the parent container. I see them being used as maybe this, if that is the term we can use as a sidecar there. One is authenticator. It's just, it has been used, and that's it. And it's just creating things, as Elliot said, it has just collected the login information. And then I see one log extractor. It's just been integrated there. And then the location is different. So that's one. And there is one more which I'm missing right now, but maybe I'll just bring up later. I'll just, just work on more on it so that I can give you precise information on it. But I don't see them the part of parent container. I see them as a separate service being integrated, worked, and then this service is being used in many other containers. So I'm not sure, should it be the sidecar, that's what we refer, or it's just a lending thing to different other containers too? How would I say that? Maybe I'm not using the right term.
Sidecars should be reusable.
Within? Reusable.
Yeah, sidecars should be reusable. So for instance, and I just had like recall of the last sidecar I was involved in. But yeah, like the logging sidecar, if you're going to use that in your organization, all the containers should use the standard sidecar, or they could have bespoke sidecars for whatever their purposes are. But that should be standard. What we were working on, and this is like interesting, which was the closest thing to kind of DataMesh before DataMesh, was event-driven data pipelines, creating Kafka pipelines with strong contracts for like services and analytics to interact with each other. And the sidecar we had, which maybe is bringing it together, was an event emitter, right? So what this thing did is it would pick up the events that were kind of staged by the service. It would check their schema, make sure the schema was good, and if the schema was good, it would convert it to Avro and usher it into Kafka, right?
Yeah.
And it was its job. And it was used in all the services that emitted data. So very similar. And yeah, that's that one kind of was trying to think, and I was like, yeah, that was DataMesh actually, and ish, and a good example of a sidecar. And it was standardized. Everybody was supposed to use the same code. Some people were naughty and didn't, by the way, which caused issues. But yeah, for the most part, people used the standard sidecar for publishing their data to their different data consumers.
Cool. Well, I'm going to let you go ahead, Elliot, and take it away with your demo of DataZone and AWS. And just for context, in case you're like watching the video, we had a Norman, I think, demonstrate a little bit of DataZone way back, but I don't think we've seen it for a while. So there's really, you can take it from the beginning because I don't remember it very well. So like do the basics. I'll give you a lot of time here. Just go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and you know, a few quick caveats to this demonstration. The first being that like this might shut off in the middle of this demo because they're ending the preview today. The second one is that the demo that I prepared started misbehaving today, and I got so frustrated I blew it away and tried to create it. So you're going to see like a primitive form of what I planned. But I do hope, and it's not fully working either. It could be that they're starting to like shut down some services or something beneath DataZone.
Don't worry about it. Whatever you show us is fine, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, but DataZone is in preview. It is like a little bit of a pain to like actually get it to do something real, you know, because it's not fully wired into everything anymore. But we'll go through it. Caveats over. So DataZone is Amazon's answer to a data mesh enabling product, right? And you know, from a product perspective, it really does two things, right? It enables a workflow of a publish and subscribe model for data. At this point, only stateful data that resides in tables, right? And it also provides a workspace model, right, where you can bring together different data sets and experiment with them and create new data sets. So there's a very strong analogy to, you know, the workspace being like a data product container, you know, being a publisher being like an output port, a subscriber being an input port, right? So it's kind of fits it pretty well. So we'll get into it. So the experience begins in the data in the Amazon console, although there is not a lot here, right? Most of the experience is in a tool like a UI, which is external to the console, which is I'll get into is a really good idea, right? But because the console is for builders, right? Primarily software engineer type builders and data engineer builders, but you know, broader consumers within the organization, you don't want to introduce them to the console. It's just pretty big and pretty scary, right? So taking that experience out, putting it somewhere else, simplifying it, and enabling like organizational and custom SSO was like kind of the plan, and they did that, and we'll show it in a minute. So at the root of DataZone is this concept of a domain, right? At the current state, you can only have one domain per AWS account. There doesn't seem to be like strong opinion. It's not very opinionated how you should use a domain. What is inside a domain is data sources, right? So in this case, I have a data source defined for Glue. You'll notice there's some others here, but we'll talk about them later. They were automatically created by DataZone. And perhaps from an experience perspective, maybe shouldn't all be in the same place, but that's okay. I'm sure they're working on it. But yeah, you could have multiple connections to different Glue databases. You could be connected to Redshift at this point as well. You know, multiple Redshift instances, serverless endpoints.
Can I pause you just a second to just show us a little bit of Glue? I'm familiar, but I would bet that some people watching are not as familiar with Glue.
Yeah,
just a little high level. You know, Glue.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to go there. Maybe not in this order, but we'll go there now.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. But basically, it's a container for connections, right? And it's also a container for the projects, which we'll get into in a minute. But you could have a domain at like an organization level, at a subsidiary level, perhaps even down to a team level. It doesn't matter too much because the whole idea is that you're able to kind of share across like the domains as well. So for those of you not familiar with Glue, I'll show you from like the lake formation perspective, which has like a certain amount of, it seems like they're merging the UIs. I think that, they're going to be one and the same eventually. But Glue essentially is a metastore. It's a Hive metastore. So it allows you to kind of register databases, and these databases could be, kind of on top of file sources or various sources that are supported by the Glue data catalog, i.e. anything that Hive supports or AWS has extended it to support. So basically everything. So you can have a table on top of anything. What we're going to be looking at today is the video click stream. So we'll see that this is actually a S3 source. I don't know why the S3 location isn't showing up, but that's okay. The tables inside of it are, okay, there you can see our S3 location. So we have one that's JSON, two that are CSV. You can come in here and you can apply like a schema, or it will infer schema if you run like a crawler, which is just like a job that automatically registers and figures out the schema, so you don't have to go in there and manually type it. But in the end, you can do something really cool. You can go and just run queries across all of these sources. So it's basically a giant database that unifies like all the different data sources that you register in it, so you can work with it, and it's consumable by just about all the AWS services. Now, the little like behind the scenes thing, like I told you what DataZone does as a product, but what it does technically is it orchestrates lake formation. It orchestrates lake formation. So what it's doing is it's going in here and it's dynamically for each project that you creating databases behind the scenes to support it, right? These two experiences are very, you have to do some stuff here and some stuff in DataZone to a certain extent. They're not perfectly integrated yet. Again, the preview ends like in a few hours or right now, so we'll see if they make it even better. But in the end, DataZone on a high level from a technology standpoint is using all of the stuff that is in lake formation, which includes, kind of security, tagging, as well as the Glue Metastore and Glue services for cataloging data behind the scenes, because all that's built, you want to use it, and all it does is orchestrate it. That's all it does. It's giving people, basically virtual databases and doing all the grants and all the orchestration to get them access to it. So that is basically what happens behind the scenes. So if we were to hop over to the DataZone UI, and again, they're reminding us that the preview is about to end. this demo will self-destruct. We're first faced with like a home screen. It's rather nice. There's some resources. It gives you like, some of the some insight into like the governance events that you've been doing. And in terms of governance, the main thing that you're doing here is doing like a little metadata management and basically orchestrating a publish and subscribe workflow, right? That's basically it. So it's a very simple tool right now. I think meant to be more conceptual, not production ready. And maybe tomorrow we'll have a really cool production ready version of it. We'll see. Or they're saving it for reInvent. But the main thing that you get is a data catalog, right? So I am logged in as a so first you could start browsing at the domain level. If there are multiple domains, you'd see that there's multiple data products. So like, hey, this is like global.com's video on demand business. Like, let's see what their kind of e-commerce business looks like and what data assets they have to share. So I am logged in as root because when I rebuilt this, I didn't bother creating any roles or anything. So I'm kind of like seeing both roles at the same time. So hopefully it's not confusing. But let's assume that I'm coming in as a consumer. There's no context for a project or anything. I see these data sets. I can come in here and see a little bit about them. So I can click on it. I can get some metadata information. I can view the schema. I can see the subscriptions that are there. And in the end, if I like what I see, I can go and subscribe, and that triggers like a subscriber workflow, a subscription workflow. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast or just right or making sense?
No, this is good. So I'm trying to match this. So this is like Dataplex in that it's for the data, it's the consumer. This DataZone UI is for the consumer.
And the producer. It's a little, you'll see in a minute, but it's meant for anybody who wants to consume or publish, create or publish a data product. So it's, this is where you go shopping to be a consumer, though, for sure. Okay.
Yeah. So I think the difference is, so far, the big difference is that the management of lakes is built into the Google Dataplex, where it's separate in Amazon.
Yeah. It's kind of, you map.
Into
DataZone, and they haven't. It's not all perfect yet, right? Like it doesn't. It's some integration.
But it kind of makes sense though if you think about it, because the lake is going to be like your DBA kind of people, and then the zones are going to be like your data science kind of people, right? So once again, Amazon's building more to what people actually use, and Google's building kind of the way they do it internally, probably.
This has like a business organization versus which would be more of a technical implementation.
So if you click subscribe, do you get emails when the data is updated, or what happens? What's the
So I'll show you real quick. I'll take it through the producer first, because that'll kind of eliminate some of this stuff.
Okay.
So the first thing is that these are projects. I've labeled them test subscriber, test producer. I shouldn't have done that, because they can be both, right? So this is a project. This is where I can have input ports, output ports. I can do work inside of this project. So test producer, I haven't subscribed to any data. We'll show subscription in a minute. I am publishing data. So this is where all the kind of interesting stuff happens. So I have 3 data assets: a video on demand asset, an app activity asset, and maybe some reporting asset that I want to publish, right? You notice they're all published. You can have them in draft mode. It's kind of just when you're setting it up and kind of configuring it. You might not want to share it with the world, but maybe you wanted to share your whole database, but you're incrementally like releasing these data assets. And if you go into them, it's basically what we saw. You have the technical details. You have a schema. You can add some business information. You can change the name. This data set was also actually called authors, but really it should have been video on demand asset, so I can rename it so business people are not confused with the fact that like my underlying data source has a bad name, right? And I can see the subscriptions. You can also go in here and there's an ability, I didn't explore it, to create like custom metadata forms. So perhaps it's like a HIPAA form, or maybe just some standard metadata form that you're going to fill out for all your data assets or assets of a certain type. So you can attach them here as well, so people can use them. Going back to the publishing. So the publishing agreement, it sounds like really advanced, but basically what it is it's governing the workflow of how you publish data. So this is ultra simplified. I am 100% sure that a lot of organizations might have trouble like using this, because it's like a one-step, like, hey, do I have to approve it or not? Or you can imagine this is going to need like a workflow engine behind it, and maybe Amazon will have something like a WYSIWYG sort of GUI, and then you could use like step functions or custom code to make it more advanced. But basically, like, hey, does it require approval? Can you have it forever? That's kind of like what they have right now. But I'd imagine these agreements could be much more advanced, right? Like in the future. So you take a data, something you want to publish, you put an agreement on it, and now here's the magic you're asking, like, well, what happens, right? So there's these things called publishing jobs. So what these publishing jobs do, they're not particularly interesting, like to click on, but oh well, why not? And you can see the runs. I rebuilt this environment, so it just ran once. So what they do is they essentially take the metadata from the Glue data catalog that you have, package it up as some sort of artifact, right? So when somebody comes to subscribe, it takes that artifact and applies it to their Glue data catalog database. So if I have S3 video on demand data, right, with a table on top of it, with some metadata defining the schema, et cetera, this essentially takes a snapshot of it, puts it out there for somebody else to download, apply, and now they have in their database a link to that data and the ability to query it. So instead of it being live, you basically run like these publishing jobs. So maybe has something to do with like controlling like how often you update your schemas and stuff. But that's what it does functionally. I don't know if they're going to come up with a different concept of how you share data. So nobody gets a notification when data gets updated or when a publishing job is run. So I don't think the publishing job matters too much for consumers if they're already subscribed, unless they're getting a new version of the metadata, perhaps. And the data is just updating underneath them. So if you've got data flowing into your S3 bucket or your Redshift table, that's just going to update. Getting back to like the experience, if you go, Varsha, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question here. So when I see this subscription open, when I click this button, does that mean that the stream is now open for me and nothing much to do with emails and other information's coming?
Exactly. Yeah, like once you're approved, you've got the data, at least in form, right? So there's no further notification. So actually, there was a little glitch. So I have an open subscription request, right? So so the test subscriber said, hey, I really want access to app activity. So if I go to the test subscriber, I can see that we're subscribed to 2 types of data. This one's approved. I can go in and use it and build a data product, right? App activity, on the other hand, is still pending. It's somebody's still waiting to give me access, so I can't use it, right? So if I go to my test approver, test producer, in this case, let's call it like video on demand data, team or whatever, right? Because these names might have been bad for kind of explaining the concepts. So if I go to my publishing and I go to my subscription requests, I'll see this is here. I can view the request. It'll give me some information. Basically, it'll, kind of by my policy, kind of present to me what's going to happen. And the requester has entered, hey, I want to create some new analytic data set. And I say, wow, that's good reason. And I can either reject it or approve it, right? So at this point, if I do approve it, I think it's going to glitch again. No, it went. Okay, that might have been my fault. I clicked bad. So I'll go to test subscriber, and yeah, you can see that these 2 things are available. So like conceptually, these could be like a Redshift in this domain and a Glue table in this domain. And the very cool thing is, which unfortunately I can't demo because I'm having some problems with my lake formation settings. I think they were fine. I messed them up. So I could click query data and I could explore all these data sets from different publishers in one place. Since the data is in the Glue catalog, you could consider inside, it's not inside DataZone, but inside that catalog, you could build out tables. You could build out views, bringing all these things together, and go ahead and publish them. So I could be a subscriber and a publisher. So I take these video on demand assets and I take this app activity data and I go ahead and run an EMR job that creates and registers, and we end up registering a new table in the Glue catalog through the backend for I don't know, like a royalty calculation, or let's say like popular videos data set, right? Or maybe it's an ML model, which is going to produce some recommendations. So then what I could do is I could come in here and go and publish that data set. It would show up as a data set that I could publish. So a lot of the bones of what we've been talking about in terms of like this container of a data product and input and output ports. Some stuff that's not quite there. If you think about like your levels, I took some notes, like the Incept and Explorer. Yeah, that's definitely here. The Bootstrap and Source, that's kind of here as well. The build, test, deploy, run, you kind of taken out of the experience, right? Like you're going to have to use different tools to do that. But overall, I think it's a step in the right direction. And I think, understanding that it orchestrates glue and lake formation makes you kind of think like, wow, if this provides like a nice workflow on that, then you can do anything in glue and lake formation behind the scenes, and kind of use that as the code and the engine to do all that build and transform stuff. So so I think that's all I've got to share today, and I bet whenever this comes out for real, it's going to be pretty cool. Hopefully some more features. One thing that is absent here that I expect they're going to integrate, which I noticed right away, is kind of like, data quality and kind of like SLA information and everything. Like if I was looking at these data sets and I said, well, wow, app activity sounds good. Is this the app activity? And like, what kind of like service levels does it have? And like, is it in breach of those service levels? And like, is the quality good? Is the quality bad? So I imagine like, they'll probably need to have those features, right? I think like integrating like Glue data quality on top of this is like a no-brainer. It's a pretty decent like data quality suite that they built. So like, just kind of plugging it in and coming up with some way that you could, tie the statistics from Glue data quality into these data products. That's kind of whirlwind tour.
Well, that's awesome. I'm putting you on the spot. If you don't know, no big deal. I'm just wondering, because Google is, really doing this integration with Vertex AI machine learning. Do you know if there's any integration with SageMaker?
And not in the tool directly.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in the plan, right? But the idea is that, because it's just going to be a lake formation table or a Glue or a lake formation database, right? A Glue metastore. It would work with all the tools, right? You could do the same imports in SageMaker to allow you to connect to a Glue database today. You could build an ML model, impute, run inference, create some data set, and rehost it here, right? The other thing which I was hoping will also be added to this is very like table based, right? Which is a great where to start. It all starts with a table, but it is missing like, hey, if I wanted to put up an API or like some inference endpoint, right, from a model or a stream of data, right? Like it's, it'd be interesting to see how that comes together.
And Dataplex has all that, so that's why it's interesting. Yeah, and Dataplex has the data quality stuff, and a lot of the tagging is exposed in a more obvious way. It looks like you can tag in there, but I wasn't so clear on how to do it. Do you tag at the level of the asset? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I believe so. And there's tagging you can do at the data source too, I believe. But let me just find one. We'll explore this together.
Yeah, because again, remember from Dataplex, the tagging is just very exposed at the level of what you're doing with the tags. Remember, they have geotags and they have data quality tags and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, the tagging is not very obvious. It is in here. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'm surprised because Amazon, is the big tag land over there, right?
Yeah, it is not like a centerpiece of this yet, but I'd imagine it would be. And like it's also like a good opportunity to add some integrations, like if you're doing like PII identification, like labeling the data.
Right.
Yes, Barsha. So
a question for Lynn here. So just wanted to know that what stuff do you see in the data quality which has been integrated in GCP? Have you explored that?
Yes. You can, they have lifecycle, it's all in the Dataplex level. So maybe in Amazon, it's in the data lake level. Again, I'm forgetting Amazon Data Lake. I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, the data lake.
Seems to me it's there.
It's not here. It's actually in Glue. The data.
Okay,
quality.
it's all in Glue. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any examples of that in this account.
Okay, but Varsha, to answer your question, it's certainly there in Amazon, and to Elliot's point, it's in the lower level products. I think it's already there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Whereas
like
kind
here
of
you have your like classification tools.
exactly. It's been there for a long time. Macy, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, where's data quality is in here, but it's not popping for me right now. But yeah, it's in it's part of the Glue product suite.
Cool.
Okay. That's
so
nice.
we are getting to the end of the hour. Elliot, thank you. That was an awesome demo.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll meet again in a couple of weeks. I actually have to prepare 1 or 2 demos of the real thing, so I should have more to show as I'm building out. I'm really curious if Amazon has any solution template, because like I showed you that GCP one, Jumpstart. If you guys, any of you run across either an Azure or an AWS one, I would love that, because I'd love to spin something up. But frankly, I don't really have a lot of cycles. So if I could click a template, I would try it, but otherwise it's going to be GCP only for a while,